under flatline. Um, what I witnessed was Mary Friend coming across the veil and scooping her son out of his physical body. And there was this exquisite reunion between mother and child. The people that I've talked to that have had black light experiences will very often, when they're describing, they just automatically do this kind of across your arm thing, and and they kind of rock back and forth a little bit, and they talk about how embracing it is, how encompassing it is, how it's unconditional love. And I think the best description is it's the womb of God.
Welcome to the Spirit Box podcast, where we explore folklore, magic, the world of the spirits, and everything in between. Dr. Scott Taylor is the president of the Expanded Awareness Institute. The EAI helps people curious about near-death experiences explore what the experience means to them and to our culture as a whole. Dr. Taylor has served as president and executive director of the Monroe Institute. He's been a trainer for the Monroe Institute since 1985. He's an expert in the use of binaural beat technology to achieve and hold expanded states of consciousness. Scott is the author and voice of 6 best-selling CDs of guided meditations on near-death experiences in his Into the Light series. He is also an experiencer, and in today's show, he gives his own moving account of his shared death experience. We go on to discuss then what happens in NDEs and what in fact is the light, and how NDEs are malleable, participatory experiences. In the Plus show, we get into dimension sliding and look at folklore analogues for the NDA entity experience. We also discuss the strangest story he ever heard in this territory, and finally, the importance of meditation in order to be focused when in an expanded state of consciousness. He reflects on how some of the frightening things people experiences are in fact metaphors designed to get our attention, and how meditators tend to do better in these cases. He also goes on to explain what binaural beats do and how they can induce the same state as NDEs. If you'd like to hear the Plus show, and indeed all the back catalogue of Plus shows, then just click on the link below and sign up to the Patreon. Very simple, very reasonable, price of a cup of coffee, you know the drill. And I hope to see you on the Patreon. Right, that's it from me. Let's get on with the show. So I'm recording from a hotel room today, so my apologies in advance to the sounds of aircon and my headphone microphone rubbing off my shirt. Now that we've got those formalities out of the way, I'd like to welcome Dr. Scott Taylor to the Spirit Box. Dr. Taylor, it's very lovely to have you on the show.
Thank you, Dara. I have been looking forward to this. This is going to be fun.
Well, to get everyone orientated and to kind of give the trajectory of this show to the listeners, could you give us an overview of your area of expertise and study?
Why, sure. I am an experiencer, a near-death experiencer. Actually, more precisely now, the language has changed somewhat lately. I had a shared death experience, and they're relatively rare, so I'm an experiencer. I'm also an academic. I did my doctoral degree at the University of St. Thomas, which is Minnesota's largest private university, where I wrote my dissertation about the people who've had near-death experiences and what happens when they touch the unity universe. I'm also a contributor, meaning that I have been very active in the International Association for Near-Death Studies, kind of our trade group. For all of you who are interested in near-death experiences, we hold a conference every year, an international conference, and I'm typically the MC, so I get to meet all kinds of people and talk to all kinds of people. And I, in general, and other than that, I'm an educator. One of the things I have done over the course of years is become real involved with the meditation aspects of this work. I was a trainer for the Monroe Institute for over 35 years and learned a way for all of us to be able to go into those types of experiences that near death experiencers go into when they have their experience through meditation, which is, let me tell you, a great way to do it. The whole needing to go there with the physical trauma thing, I don't recommend it.
So you mentioned you're an experiencer yourself, and I think now that the audience knows that we're going to be discussing near death experiences, that would be a great place to start.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to tell you about my experience. Um, it happened in 1981. I was in love with a beautiful woman. Her name was Mary Frances Randall, and she and her young son Nolan had been out sailing on a lake in southern Minnesota. And on their way home, um, they were involved in a horrific car accident, and Mary Fran was killed outright. And Nolan, who had just turned 7, had this mortal head wound. They took the both of them to Rochester Mayo in Rochester, Minnesota, and there, um, uh, Nolan fought for his life for 6 days. Um, One of the things about Mary Fran is that her family was large. She was number 3 out of a total of 9 kids. And so during that intervening 6 days, there were lots of time for the relatives to come and to hold vigil and to support Nolan and to be with him as he was in the hospital fighting for his life. What that meant was that every couple of hours, there would be a different shift of relatives that would go in and be with him because there were so many of us there. It was the morning, it was, yeah, it was the 6th morning when it was my shift. And I went in with Janie, who is, she was number 1 child, the oldest sister. And um, we went into his hospital room and just to be with him. Um, he was in a coma ever since the accident. But one of the things we know about people in comas is that they um, very often hearing is still active. So, we sat down with him and we told him, you know, who was in the hospital and because there were so many of them, of the relatives, we tell them stories about who was doing what. And, when we went in, the latest adventure was that they were off scouring the hospital to steal cushions off of the sofas and take them up to the waiting room so they could sleep on the floor. You know, just stories like that to try to lift his spirits and show him that we cared. Well, we started at 3 a.m. It's about quarter to 5, and our shift is about ready to end. And Janie, who is a trained trauma nurse, remember she went to the end of the bed and she looked at his chart, and then she looked at all of the monitors that were, surrounding him, and she looked at me and she shook her head and um, she said, "Scott, it's time." So we grabbed a couple of chairs and we pulled them up alongside of Nolan's head. And we told him that he had been a very brave boy, that he had been fighting and fighting to try to stay alive for us and to be with us. But if his mother should come, remembering that, she died 6 days before, um, So we said if his mother should come, and if she wanted to take him with her, that it was okay, that it was time, that it would be time for him to go, and it was okay to go and leave us and go with his mother. So we told him that we loved him dearly, and we said our goodbyes, and then our shift was over and we left the room and the next shift came in. Well, it was about 45 minutes later when the nurse on the floor came into the waiting room where everybody was sleeping on all sorts of things. And she told us that it was time, that it wouldn't be long now. And so this whole great group of relatives and friends and uncles and aunts and nieces and nephews and grandparents, we all filed into this little hospital room. And just the way it turned out, I was one of the last people to enter into the room. And it was already about 4 deep around the bed. And I didn't see any reason to be standing 5 deep. So I went over and sat down on the windowsill next to Mary Fran's youngest brother, Willie. And we just waited. I mean, I don't know if any of your guests have ever done that, but at least in this case, it was quiet, it was gentle, and the heart monitor was just gently slowing and slowing until it came to that ominous tone that they make when it flatlines. And when that heart monitor flatlined, what I witnessed was Mary Fran coming across the veil and scooping her son out of his physical body. And there was this exquisite reunion between mother and child that you could only guess would happen. And somehow I got to participate in that emotion, in that feeling, as the two of them reunited. And then, to my surprise, the two of them turned to me, they embraced me, and then the three of us left and went to the light together. And when we entered into the light, it was the most extraordinary experience that you can possibly imagine. It was just love with capital letters. It was exquisite. It was ecstasy. It was unity. I was reunited with all that is. I was reunited with parts of myself. It was an extraordinarily loving and uniting experience. And then the three of us had some time. And we had some time to express our affection for each other. We had time to be with one another. We had time to say our goodbyes. And we had time just to rest in each other's energies. And then at some point, and I can't really describe it, but at some point we seemed complete. And then the two of them turned, and Mary Fran led Nolan off further into the light, and I wound up coming back into my physical body and being there in the room with all the other relatives. So, Dara, that's part A. Part B is that when I left and went with them into the light, I was also fully present in my physical body in the room with the other grieving relatives. I didn't have a word for it then, but I do now. It's called bilocation. I had two distinctly separate, fully functioning consciousnesses, one with Mary Fran and Nolan, and one in the room with the other grieving relatives. And I know this to be true because as I'm sitting there on the windowsill next to Willie, I am in this state of rapture. It's like ecstasy is just trying to break out of me. And if anybody had looked at my face, I would have been entirely inappropriate for the room, or it would have been completely misunderstood because I know on my face it just had this huge grin. I mean, I was just so happy. And certainly you can understand that wouldn't be appropriate for everybody else in the room. So I did the only thing I could think of to do, and that was to take and cover my face with my hands. And I just stayed that way until that other part of me that was with Mary Fran and Nolan could come back and be in the physical. It was like the two parts of me could come back together again and reunite. And once I was, settled back in my physical body, then I could take my hands down and I could go and be with the other relatives and cry on their shoulder and be, and we were there for each other. So let's just say that I didn't know what to do with that. It was so outside of my experience that I kept quiet about it for 15 years. So it was yes. So that is that is a very typical shared death experience. Back to you, Dara.
Firstly, excuse me. Firstly, Scott, thank you for sharing that story. And I can tell that even after this time, it still holds a lot of emotion for you. And
Can I talk about that for a second?
yeah, of course.
Because that's I don't want to misrepresent that emotion because it is a very complicated emotion because I miss them. I miss Mary Fran. I miss their physical presence, and I'm. But at the same time, when I tell this story, I am tapping into that space that is filled with such wonder and joy. And it's one of the reasons I had a hard time telling people about this experience is because the emotion is woven between deep sadness and this incredible amount of wonder and joy and ecstasy. So it's not just one emotion, it's the two of them wound together. I couldn't separate them if I tried. It's so when I tear up or when my voice catches a little bit, it's both those things. It's the sadness and it's the joy of being reunited with the love of the universe.
I understand how that can be overwhelming to feel almost two conflicting things at once. It's a remarkable experience, and I'm grateful to you for sharing. It's interesting, kind of, when I was first researching you and the show, as I said to you before we hit recording, you just jumped out at me, and I was like, I need to talk to Dr. Taylor, and it's actually dawned on me why, as you were telling that story, um, and and I will get to that. I don't want to break your flow, but I will get to it. But you've reminded me particularly of a near-death experience that one of my family members had, and the story that has come down through my family about it.
Ah,
And
this will be fun.
but should I go? Should I go for it now? And I'll tell you now, and then I'll stop talking. One of the things I'm conscious of is that, like, it's like people are tired of listening to me, you know. But my aunt, when she was a child, was seriously ill, to the point that she was given the last rites. I think she was under 10. But my mother was her twin, and was there with her along with the rest of her family to be with her as she was due, basically about to die. And my mother saw her grandparents, who had gone to the other side many years before, in the corner of the room, calling her sister on, saying, you know, it's okay, we're here, you know, we'll look after you, we're ready for you. My mother saw this, and my aunt pulled through. She was a very ill child by all accounts. As I said, she got the last rites. Apparently, she got it a few times, but she pulled through, and she recounted the same story to my mother. She saw their grandparents at the corner of the room towards the foot of their bed. Yeah, it just triggered that memory when you were saying that, and equally the sense of peace, the sense of contentment, the feeling of love in a way that we don't really have the language to describe it.
Yep.
Yeah, like a type of universal love. And this is, you know, essentially the account, you know, an adult recalling a memory as a child. But yeah, that's just sprung to the front of my mind. And
Well, you said, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please go ahead.
You said two really important things there. Um, one is that when people leave their body for the last time, it is very common for them to witness guides, people that will come and be their guide and take them to the light. And in most cases, it's a loved one, like my grandparents, right? That makes perfect sense that she would see her grandparents there, and that they would be the ones to pick her up and take her to the light. But there's a derivative of that that's really interesting. I had a chance to be with my cousin, who was dying of ovarian cancer. And as I was with her in the hospice, um, I she, she was telling me how terrified she was of crossing over, and how it was, you know, the unknown, and who's she going to face, and is she going to be judged, and all that. But one of the things that we now know is that you can ask for who you would like to come and pick you up. So if you would like to have your grandparents or Uncle Fred or your pet dog Sally, or maybe it's a divine figure, you know, if you're Christian, maybe you know, you want St. Paul to come, or Jesus, or Mary, or Joseph, or somebody, you know, you can ask. But, you know, truthfully, most people don't pick divine figures. They actually pick people that they have a big heart connection with. And the second thing that is really interesting, almost always um, those loved ones that come to pick you up come out of the upper corner of the room, because for some reason
Wow.
the vectors on a corner, it's like a portal. It focuses energy. It's how they come in, and they'll almost, always be upper left or upper right. I see them more upper left, but it doesn't make a difference really. But the corner seems to be the thing that focuses the energy. So as you listen to these stories, you kind of smile to yourself and go, "Where were they? Oh yeah, they were up in the." Yeah, my 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 former father-in-law, um, when he was in the hospital room, um, he was a little skinny man, and he was Norwegian, kind of, just this cheerful little man. And what came to him were, those little fat angels with wings, the cherub. I said, only you would invite those people in. And he was lucid enough that he described them. He said, "Oh yeah, there's a couple. There's another one over. This one's got red hair." And I find those stories wonderful. And I isn't it great that it's in your family history, that
Yeah.
that when we make our transition, it's not scary at all, because somebody we know and love is there waiting for us and is going to scoop us out of our physical body.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think that's really incredible. That's a bit overwhelming. I know my family will be, well, the two who witnessed it will be thrilled when I pass that detail on to them. It's these things as children, when you look back over your memories, you start to wonder about the reality of what you experience and all that kind of stuff. So to have those kind of confirming details, I think they'd be thrilled. I really do.
And if your listeners are so they're curious about doing this with a loved one who's passing, um, what I wound up doing with Kathy was just to walk her through what a typical near-death experience looks like, so that it was, lifting out of your physical body, and then there's a guide, somebody that you love and want, and all they have to do is picture it in their mind. Yes, it will be Uncle Fred. Uncle Fred will be the one that will be there, and that's the invitation. It's that image, that sense of Uncle Fred, and it's done. It That's all that it takes. And then it's like, okay, you get to go through this tunnel, and then there's a reunion party. Who do you want to invite to the reunion? And there's all of the friends and relatives and the pets, and you get to design that too if you want. Do you want it inside or outside? Do you want a tent or not? Do you want food? What kind of food? Do you want tablecloths? Do you want music? You want to play games? I mean, you can make this as elaborate, as simple as you want. This idea of when you come into the light, there are people there ready and willing to embrace you as you come into, well, come back home. I think that's the best way to describe it. And oh my gosh, it's fun. Oh my gosh, it's fun. Oh, so
Um,
anyway, for people who want to do that with their relatives who are, at the end, just you can pick up a book about, what are the common elements of a near death experience, and then just kind of walk them through. You know, who do you want? What do you want to have happen? And boy, it gives them great peace that they know everything's going to go okay. And then on top of that, for some, like my cousin Kathy, it gave her, it switched fear into anticipation that she was going to go see her grandparents and her uncle. It really was Uncle Fred, and that she loved the dogs that she raised growing up, and when her kids were small, they had a whole series of dogs that just really meant a lot to her, and that they were going to be there, and she was going to have picnic food. And for her, that meant hamburgers, baked beans, coleslaw, and beer. And yes, there is beer in heaven if you would like it. The polka song is wrong.
Well, that's good news. I'm glad to hear that. Some of my favorite things. So you mentioned the light,
Yeah.
and there's the famous kind of motif of people going down the tunnel to the light, and then whether they go through the light is the barrier between staying or going to the other side. That may be me thinking about movies too much, but I wanted to ask you, from your perspective, from your research, what is the light? What happens to people when they encounter it?
No. That is such a good question. My shorthand answer to that is that it's an aspect of God. And because I don't think we can even begin to understand the vastness of what God means. The light is it's a nice representation that's been scaled down for us so that we can get it. And there's three kinds of light. As we discovered in near-death research, there's the easy one is the white light at the end of the tunnel, right? That is ubiquitous in our media, in the stories that we, tell each other. It's an image that is now pervasive in our culture, and children call it like the father light. It's big, it's bold, it's intense, it's it has this I would almost say overwhelming. It is so bright. People talk about it as like 10,000 suns times 10,000 suns. And yet, because we don't have physical eyes, we have non physical eyes, when we're looking at it, it doesn't hurt them. And I had a couple of people I've interviewed, really smart people. They're up against this huge, bright, encompassing light, and they had the presence of mind to turn around and look behind them. No shadow. So you become, what that means is that you become part of the light, that you enter into this vast, bright, wonderful, loving light. That's white light. Black light is, if you've heard meditators talk about the source, or if you're a fan of the Old Testament, Genesis 2 talks about before there anything, there was the deep and the void. This is what that is. It's before anything physical existed. There was this state of where everything was like pre-physical. It's the before it comes into form, anything comes into form, it comes from this place. The people that I've talked to that have had black light experiences will very often, when they're describing, they just automatically do this kind of cross your arm thing. and they kind of rock back and forth a little bit, and they talk about how embracing it is, how encompassing it is, how it's unconditional love. And I think the best description is it's the womb of God. Black light. The other one is clear light. Doesn't happen very often. It's actually the kind that I had. Um, and that's where you're in a space, and all of a sudden you begin to realize that everything in this space is exuding its own light. And so instead of there being a light that's this way, what you realize is everything is made up of the light of the universe, of the light of God. It is the um, it just flows out of everything. So this microphone and that light over in the corner, and the books in the background, and the computer we're talking over, everything is made up of light at its smallest component, light. And it's clear, and you begin to understand that you are not apart from anything. This is a true unity experience when you step into this, or have enter into this, and discover that all things are made of light, including us. And we, these boundaries that we have, the edge of our skin versus the earth, it's all artificial. It doesn't, that doesn't exist anymore. So black, white, or clear, um, the kind of experience people have when they have a near death experience will depend a little bit on what light they encounter.
That's so intriguing. That's really, really remarkable when you think about how so many of our kind of foundational stories are about the the conflict, the juxtaposition, the marriage, the dance between dark and light, and so often that gets kind of twisted into a good versus evil thing when it's really not that. And it was so refreshing to
No,
hear your description of what that the dark light, that void
yeah,
is. That's
I've
really,
had,
really interesting.
yeah, I've had people tell me that, oh no, the black light is like a version of the devil, or black is bad. No, that's a cultural overlay. It has nothing to do with um, the type of experience. And all of this exists in the unity universe. It doesn't exist in this world of duality, which we inhabit right now. And that's just about contrast. I like that word better, because I think it allows us to be able to say, oh, there's this experience and that experience, but you know, how to describe one as good versus one versus bad, it's it's not that simple. And there's it's so nuanced. But how do you, if you come from a if our souls come from a place of unity, if that is home, where everything is connected to everything else, how do you know who you are? And you do that by coming into a world of contrast, where now you are different. I am different than you, Dara, and I'm different than this table that I'm sitting at, and I'm different than that light in the back corner. But really, I'm not. you know, when we all leave and we go into the unity universe, it's all connected. Um, I've had so many people who I've had a chance to interview will say something like, um, if I were to reach out and strike you, it, literally, it's me striking myself. And why would I do that? That makes no sense. It may make sense in the world of duality, but in the end, it doesn't make sense. So we have this really difficult thing of trying to reconcile these two rules that are present. You know, the rules that govern duality, the rules that govern the physical universe are distinctly different than the rules that govern the unity universe. And um, and so we as human beings, I think, are starting to come to grips now with the fact that we can choose which set of rules that we want to abide by. And and it can be either or both. And you know, and that's when it starts to get really interesting if you're trying to describe what is our history. Um, you mentioned like origin stories. Um, how where do we come from and why do we come this way? And I'm I'm struck by there are certain Christians who say the world is 6,000 years old, and yet the scientists say that this Earth is 4.5 billion years old. And then the scientists will say, well, if you really want to look at it, the universe is 13.5 billion years old. So we have this time problem. But it depends on where you're trying to tell your story. So here's what I'm imagining is that, there's some monk, right, who's been meditating his brains out for 25 years, and he goes up on the top of the mountain and he has an epiphany. He is shown the origin of the universe, and of course it's done in the original, in the non-physical universe where there is no time. And he comes off the mountains and he's trying to describe how the universe was created. And let's just say the Big Bang is what he's shown. Yet to be proven, but I want to make my point. And so he's describing this Big Bang and how it formed the earth and the gases, and people would say, well, how long did it take? And he can't speak because it happened that fast. It happened outside of time. And and so if you're trying to describe something that happens out of time and people want to know what the timing is, you're going to have to invent something. So it's 7 days and then 6,000 years, or it's 4.5 billion. The answer is that they're both correct. That's where we have the hardest difficulty, is to describe things that happen in the unity universe using duality's terms to overlay on that, and it is really an imperfect match.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and you see this kind of challenge in many kind of esoteric fields, where people have experiences, much like you're describing. Sometimes they have direct interface with spirits and other intelligences. It is almost impossible to bring, concepts with more dimensional realities back to a limited dimensional reality.
Yeah. When you're reading about near-death experiences, you'll run across this word all the time. In fact, it's the number one when they talk about the common elements of a near-death experience. The first one is ineffable. Isn't it? It's a great English word that means we don't have any words for it. We just don't have the right words to describe what's going on. And if you're asking somebody who's had a spiritually transformative experience, or an NDE or an SDE, one of those, just smile to yourself, because at some point they will do the goldfish response, where they just sit there and move their mouth. And nothing comes out. You can't hear a word because they're trying like crazy to come up with some metaphor that will work. And the mouth moves, but there's no sound. So I call that the goldfish response. And it's And it's perfectly acceptable because it's very difficult. It is very difficult.
This is where it's good I have my microphone turned off because I'm laughing so much at that. It's the perfect metaphor. I like that. So one of the questions I think that what you're describing brings up, particularly with consciousness leaving the body, is it starts to ask questions about our physicality and the function of, for example, we would see the brain as the seat of our consciousness. We have two eyes. We have the perception that we're looking at two eyes. If you ask people where they think, we associate the sound of our voices with our heads. Do we think in our heads? I guess so. I don't know. So it asks a lot of questions about consciousness, not least where it is, but what it is. Let's park that one. That's a massive question.
Yeah.
But look at it in terms of, well, what's the body then?
Oh, I think this is such a great question. And we're now actually getting to that answer. And the latest scientific research has indicated that the brain is a filtering mechanism, that consciousness exists out with our non-physical body, and it is tied to everything in the universe. That's why all of this hand movement here. It's so we are connected with everything, and we have access to all the information of the universe, all times, all spaces. That is just who we are. We exist in multiple dimensions at one time, and we have access to all this information. Okay, so we choose to come down here into this physical world. We would just be blithering idiots here with all of that. And what seems to happen is that the brain acts as a reduction mechanism. It filters out all of the information we don't need, because here in the physical world, let's face it, for a long, long time, this is a dangerous place. We have snakes in the grass and tigers in the trees, and there's lots of things that we need to pay particular attention to smell and to hearing and to, what's going on kinesthetically with our bodies so that we can stay safe and exist in this physical dimension. So there's a lot of information. I mean, you really don't need to know what's going on in the third ring at Saturn. You just don't need that information because you need to be safe here in the physical world. And so that's the reigning theory at the moment, is that the brain reduces the amount of information that we need to exist in the physical world. And then things like a spiritually transformative experience or a near-death experience or shared death experience happen, and some of those filters get turned off. And when the people come back, there's just tons of evidence that they're more psychic, they're more sensitive to their environment. We were joking before the show began that whenever you have people with near-death experiences on the show, technology will often go wrong. It's difficult. Their energetic structure is changed as a result of that experience, and it blows up computer chips. You need a watch that has a physical mechanism and not chips in it. And there's just all kinds of really interesting things that happen to people who've had, well, for me, this is absolutely worthless, but it happens. If I'm driving along at twilight or just after, when it's just dark, I'm going down the highway and I turn off the street lights. Go
No,
by, and then they turn
that's
back
hilarious.
on again.
No
You know,
way.
I said, that's a really nifty trick, but boy, there's just like zero use for that in today's world. Oh, anyway, so yeah, um, that's the theory that seems to make the most sense right now.
So a medical condition that absolutely fascinates me, and I believe it's in this kind of territory in relation to the function of the brain and what it does, particularly as you're describing, is Charles Bonnet syndrome. You know,
Help me out with that one. I'm not sure what that is.
so it's essentially people have intense visual hallucinations, and see all kinds of they can be like detailed patterns or beings. Like I read, I can't remember where I read this, but it was like a description like of a small brass band just going across the table. So it's like this kind of like strange just expressions of novelty happening around people, but it particularly happens with people in the late stages of their life with deterioration in the brain. And I'm probably putting 2 and 2 together and getting 78, but it seems to be in the similar territory of the brain's function breaking down as providing that kind of aperture into this reality, and its function breaking means that you're starting to experience a far more fluid reality, or
there's
information expressing itself.
I'm struck by, oh shoot, there's a technical name for it, but it's the kinds of experiences people have as they are in the last stages of the death process. You described what happened to your aunt, but deathbed visions, are kind of in this vein, and there'll be, they may be people in the room waiting for them, but they also can come up as metaphorical, like, say, granddad, you look like you're seeing something. He says, yeah, I'm at the train station and I'm waiting for the train to come and pick me up. And people will go, Grandpa, you're in the hospital, and they try to drag them back down into reality. But really what's going on is Grandpa is saying, I'm ready, I'm waiting. The train is going to come pick me up. I had a guy who I was talking with, and he loved to golf. And so what he's doing, his foursome is on deck, ready to go and tee off. There's a group ahead of him, and as soon as he can, he'll go up and he'll tee off on the first tee. And so, is it really a band, or is this a metaphor that's created for that person to say, I don't know, maybe they always like little band music. Is it time for you to join the band and move on?
Yeah.
And so now it becomes a really interesting psychological adventure as you're trying to figure out, is Grandpa talking about something that's metaphor, or is he talking about something that's real, or is this a hallucination? Because that could be too, as the brain just doing some random firing stuff. Yeah, you just don't know.
I think your point about metaphor and symbolism is a big thing, and certainly, I mean, as you already described, you look at that monk trying to describe the Big Bang and the creation of the universe, and he simply doesn't have the language for it. in a way, even to kind of, to pull that thread a little bit further. No one does,
No, and you only have the metaphors that are in
yeah,
your head. You
exactly.
can't pull something from somebody else because,
Yeah,
I'm not Hindu.
yeah,
It doesn't help me to pull something from the elephant god Ganesha in. Because it wouldn't make any sense to me. So you're right. It's you can only go with what you got, and I'm some of it could be really creative. Oh,
I love that. That's great. So you excuse me, in terms of the universe, or the universe is used, where you use that phrase, is it unity universe? Is that the phrase you use?
yep, unity universe
Um,
or non-physical universe,
okay,
same.
right. And we within the physical bodies, we have physical limitations. We're experiencing a physical world. We have a set of rules that we have identified, that I guess we think are correct. I mean, what does?
Well, one of the things,
Go
just
ahead.
to play off of that, so when people go and they are in a near-death experience, they've left the world of duality and they're now in the non-physical universe, and they're seeing things. And if you're adroit enough interviewer, you will say, well, how did you see them? Because seeing is 360 degrees. So it's not the stereoscopic vision that we have here in the physical world, which we need to look out for snakes and tigers. But there, it's 360 degrees. And hearing, for instance, fascinating in that you can tune your hearing. And it's like, I want to hear what's going on in that city that's 12 miles away. Well, you can do that. You just do it. And then how about where you are placement wise? So I'm up in heaven and I'm on a cloud talking to some divine being, and I want to go to my best friend Chuck's reunion party. He's just coming up from so you just think about where you want to be and you're there. So it's all about intention. And so there's no physical limitations in terms of travel. Anyway, so there's in the unity universe, there's only love, loving consciousness. Stefan Schwartz talks about that the fundamental building block of the universe, the thing that the most irreducible thing that there is consciousness. That is what makes everything. That atoms and molecules and quarks and up and down leptons. I mean, all of that comes out of consciousness, and so when you begin to realize that consciousness is what rules, and what you can imagine then becomes the only limiting factor. It becomes an extraordinary place.
Awesome, thank you. And this is an area that you have a lot of publication, and you've published a lot of audio supporting audio meditations. Can you tell us about that?
They are right behind me. Mini commercial there. I have 6 albums of guided meditations that take people to the same place that near-death experiencers go to, and it's done through, like we said, it's done through meditation and not through physical trauma. You can go to the same places and say, like the life review. You can experience a life review without having to, have the car accident. And all of this is about different vibratory states. And that's what's lovely about binaural beats, whether it's, developed by the Monroe Institute or anybody else. There's a lot of them out there now. Is that they help you enter into a vibratory state that allows you to, go in through a portal into an expanded state of awareness. And then from there, it's all about intention. What do you want to do here? Do you want to get healed? Do you want to plan your future lives? You want to check in with your council of self, the council of elders? You want to go to the Akashic records? All that's available to you. It's just, you just need to learn the skill of changing your vibration to match that, where the Akashic records are. And then off you go. And binaural beats can help. You can do it without it too. It just takes a little longer.
Fantastic. I'll make sure all the relevant links are in the show notes. So, Dr. Taylor, it's been, as said, a real pleasure talking to you. Time has flown by, and it's been great. Thank you so much for coming on the Spirit Box.
My pleasure, Dara. This has been a hoot. I knew we'd have fun.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. It's been great.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I hope you all enjoyed that. I found it really interesting, quite an uplifting show, which is a welcome break from some of the challenging subject matter we cover on this show. If you want to find out more about Dr. Taylor's work, then check the show notes, give him a follow, and then that's it from me. Take care and talk soon. I'm Dara Mason, and you've been listening to The Spirit Box.